A guten Erev Shabbos. There was a shul once in the old country, a modest shtibel, where one morning a Jew called Beryl rushed in with great excitement. He ran to the middle of the shul and he banged on the bima and he said, Rabbi Sai, listen, my dear friends, I have something very important to tell you. He said, last night I had a dream, a very clear, a very vivid dream. I dreamed that we were all together in the shul and that you all decided that you would appoint me as your rabbi. So what do you say, huh? Do we have a deal or what? Everyone in the shul was a little surprised. They looked around each other a little uncomfortably. It was quiet for a minute or two. And finally, one of these Jews found his voice to speak up. He said, Beryl, my dear Beryl, it's just as you say. We believe in dreams, and that would be a nice idea. He said, there's just one thing you got wrong. It's we who are supposed to have that dream, not you. The idea of leadership in Jewish life is an interesting one, and it's developed and adapted over time from prophets to judges to kings to exilarchs to prime ministers, not to mention shul boards of trustees. And different leaders reflect their era and different aspects of leadership and of the people that they lead. Not every Jew in Eastern Europe was as eager as our friend Beryl to be a leader or a king or a rebbe. One of them, whom we know now as Reb Shloimeh, the Rebbe of Radomsk, the Radomsker Rebbe, was actually adamant that he would not take on a leadership position. The way Rabbi Zevin tells it in his book of Hasidic stories, Reb Shloimeh actually declined the leadership of his people. Then it was 1 week before Shavuos, and crowds of people started to gather. They converged on the town where he lived in Radomsk, looking forward to spending Yom Tov with the man they thought would be their Rebbe. Radomsk today is a bustling metropolis of 40,000 people, about one block of Bathurst Street. So you can imagine what it looked like in 1834. Reb Shlomo told the people, go home. He said, there's no Rebbe here. I'm not a Rebbe. I'm not going to be meeting with people. It's not happening. The next day, he saw that not only was everyone ignoring him, a sure sign of rabbinic leadership, but the crowds were actually growing by the hour. People were streaming into the town. What was he to do? What could he do? He skipped town. He caught a carriage and he went off to spend Yom Tov with Rabbi Cheskel of Kuzmir. When he got there, his colleague yelled at him, another indicator of rabbinic success and greatness. He said, what are you doing here? What about the Jews of Radomsk you left behind? Rabbi Cheskel gave him a hard time. How can you leave your flock, the flock, without a shepherd? He admonished him with a verse from Exodus about the giving of the Torah. The verse in Exodus says, Vayered Moshe min hahar el ha'am. Moshe descended from the mountain to his people. And Rashi comments on this verse that Moshe did not turn aside to his own affairs. He only went from the mountain to the people. Now I ask you, said Rabbi Yecheskel, what kind of affairs, what kind of business interest did Moshe Rabbeinu have in the wilderness? This is what Rashi meant. Our ancestors were busy at that time preparing themselves for the giving of the Torah, preparing themselves spiritually, each according to the level that they were able. And Moshe Rabbeinu, obviously, wanted to prepare himself to the level of holiness and purity that he would have liked, in keeping with his capacity. Despite this, Moshe turned away from his own spiritual work. He put aside his own aspirations and he directed all his efforts towards his people. That's why it says, from the mountain to the people, min hahar el ha'am. So tell me, says Reb Yecheskel to Reb Shloimeh, how could you leave your people in the desert, in Radomsk there, and run away and come here? Reb Shloimeh was no slacker, and he had an answer ready. He said, Moshe Rabbeinu was at least near the mountain, so he wasn't so much in need of preparation. I also wanted to be near the mountain. That's why I came to you, my dear teacher. To that, his host had no answer, and he let him stay. That Yom Tov, as it turned out, became a very special one that has endured in memory, particularly of the Radomsker Chassidim. They asked Reb Shloimeh to sing the Akdamus. As he was known for his beautiful voice, he organized a choir of 80 singers to accompany him, and the beautiful sound of that day made a lasting impression on all who were there, and they're still telling the story. Still, the point in the story is a certain kind of humility, maybe even the shying away from the duty, of the responsibility of leadership. If someone really has a sense that they are unqualified or not fitting, don't they have the right to decline a place of leadership? There are probably any number of people in our world today, in the Jewish world, certainly in the wider realms of leadership, that we wish sometimes would decline the role of leadership. We wish they would say, I'm just not up to the task. I'm not the right person for the moment. If it were only true. So where is true leadership to come from? Maybe we'll get some insight if we look into this week's Parsha, the beginning of Bamidbar in the wilderness, book of Numbers. We're going to recount some less than pleasant incidents in our people's 40-year history of travel from slavery to freedom. We're going to learn a lot in this book. It won't be all roses, especially not in the desert. We'll have rebellions and wars and attacks, and we'll learn what it takes to sustain ourselves and get over the finish line into Israel, which of course is really the starting line. The arrangement of the Israelite camp is part of our Sedra this week, how the nation camped, organized by tribe, in an arrangement that held its formation as we made our way forward through the desert. This was before WhatsApp. So people needed to orient themselves. They needed to know where they were in relation to each other in their group and vis-a-vis the entire people. So each tribe had a flag, a banner, a pennant that helped us orient ourselves. This was not color war or our team versus your team kind of thing. All the flags were moving at the same time in the same direction. And amidst all this order and organization, the individuality of each tribe got to express itself. Rav Kook emphasizes that these were not oppositional, they were complementary groups. Yehuda's flag was blue, it had a lion on it. Dan's flag was a sapphire and had a snake. Midrash Tanchuma mentions that the flags were color-coded to the stones on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, which had each tribe's name engraved on it. I think Rashi mentions this. Rav Kook further mentions that the colors suggested individuality and a multiplicity of ways to be authentically Jewish. These colors came together in sort of a rainbow, if you will, that motivated the people to embrace their brothers and sisters as they were amidst all the diversity. Recognizing that there could be similarly legitimate and valuable paths to divine service, nurtured a mutual respect and progress toward the greater good. Unity rather than uniformity was the goal here. The theme of the flags in the Parsha, when seen on the heels of the national census that opens this Parsha and this Chumash, gives it the name of the book of Numbers, highlights one of Rav Kook's central teachings, which is called Torat HaKlal. Let's call it a doctrine of national unity. The secret strength of our people, he says, is our unity. This was on display to such a great extent over the last 8 months of what we've seen in our time. We do have to ask, why does it take such a catastrophic attack on our people for us to realize that we have more in common than what divides us? But the disparate groups, the different clans and tribes and sects and teams and parties that make up our people are in truth part of one body, one organic whole, even if we frequently put our best efforts into making it seem that we have nothing in common. And every tribe is answerable to this attitude. No one is without responsibility here. Rav Kook arrived in Palestine from Lithuania to become rabbi of Yafo. This was 120 years ago, about 5 years before the city of Tel Aviv was founded. He arrived to this province of the Ottoman Empire to find, what do you think? The Jews fighting with one another. This group against that group, that ideology against this political alignment. He had a hard time coming to terms with it. In his view, the return to Zion was our time to shine, our time to live up to our national destiny, our highest ideals. This model of different tribes flying different banners but moving in the same direction was a core pillar of his vision for what the Jewish people could become in the land of Israel. Each group flying its own flag, becoming the best they could be, as he might have put it, serving God with flying colors, was what this was all about. Rav Kook spent the last 30 years of his life speaking with ordinary Jews who were not part of his rabbinic orbit, visiting kibbutzim, embracing secularist Jews who had come to build the land, and modeling open-heartedness towards his fellow. So, when Rav Kook was invited to address the assemblage at a gathering in 1925, when they brought the banner, the flag of the British Army's Jewish Legion from the Great War, brought it to Palestine, brought it to Yerushalayim, he cited this week's Parsha, although the ceremony was in December. Rabbis are good at that. He mentioned the flags of each tribe. The idea was actually the Jewish people's. When we witnessed the revelation at Mount Sinai, which we'll relive next week at Shavuot, Midrash Rabbah on that portion recounts that we saw tens of thousands of angels arrayed according to banners. And we said, hey, you know what? Those banners look cool. Could we get some of those? And that's the origin of the instruction for the flags in Bamidbar, according to the Midrash. Rav Kook welcomed this flag of the Jewish Legion, which at the time was called the Zion Mule Corps, and under which they fought. It had a blue and white background and a menorah on it. And some of the notable soldiers who fought under this banner included Gershon Agron, Nachum Gutman, Yitzchak Ben Tzvi, Beryl Katznelson, Levi Eshkol, David Ben Gurion, and the fathers of Yigal Yadin and Yitzchak Rabin. It's a good question to ask how far we've come in the last century. It's been a challenging 100 years, but we have known some challenging times in our history. It seems like we're in the middle of them once again. If we rise to Rav Kook's challenge, if we look beyond the petty and the small, the divisive issues, which can always do damage and be the cause for strife and turning away from and against each other, if we can turn away from that, if we can push that aside, we can continue to build the people, the vision that Moshe got from God at Sinai, the vision that kept us all moving through the desert together, and the unity that keeps us together in hard times and hopefully through good ones. As we prepare ourselves now in these days, from Rosh Chodesh to Chag HaShavuot, Zman Matan Toratenu, the holiday of the giving of the Torah, let's not leave it to others to take the leadership role in our lives. It could be they're running away from responsibility for whatever reason. Let's rather find our own drive and passion to move forward as part of Machaneh Yisrael, part of the Jewish nation, under whichever banner we choose, but knowing that unity will take us in a good direction. Shabbat Shalom, Chodesh Tov, Chag Sameach, and wishing you Kabbalas HaTorah, B'simcha u'v'pnimius, receiving the Torah on Shavuot joyfully and inwardly.